The only thing that is toxic about masculinity is when masculinity isn't present. 90% of gang members come from fatherless homes. 85% of youth in prison come from fatherless homes. 70% of teenage pregnancies come from fatherless homes. All of these things, which are negative, come from a lack of a positive male role model in their lives. Nothing is toxic about masculinity. There is a view that manhood is evil and men are evil and all we do is do evil things, which is a bag of garbage. Manhood is the pillars, the foundation on which a healthy society stands.
Real men, raw stories, radical perspectives. This is the voice of authentic masculinity. This is Manhood Speaks. Today we have a special guest, Mr. Alvin Brown. He's an electrical engineer with an interest in renewable energy. However, he's a firm believer in the creation of critical thinkers, and we know that that is a need in society. He has worked in academia at various levels. However, it was at the high school level where he recognized a vacuum exists, where young men are without father figures, and they often seek to find identity in the negative images in media, especially social media, as well as the poor role models in their communities. Because of that, he have created the Manly Man series. This is a series that shares a message of responsibility and challenges young men to become the best version of themselves. So today, the Manly Man series meets Manhood Speaks. Alvin Brown, welcome to Manhood Speaks.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. So now that we have heard about the job titles and the description, who is the man behind the journey that we are about to hear about?
Well, simply someone who is focused on continuous improvement. I'm always an individual who focuses on a solution as opposed to complaining about the problem. And that has caused me to be involved in a number of activities through life. So I'm all about continuous improvement and I'm all about finding solutions to problems. That is a short answer to the question.
Lovely. So you are that solution-oriented guy. Why is that important to you at this point in your life?
I think generally it makes it simple. It makes life simple. If there's something that can be done about a situation, then you do it. If there's nothing you can do, then try. Because sometimes you might fight up. You might be the guy who has a bucket mopping up the sea. You don't want to be that guy. You want to make sure you can identify what problems can be solved. Once it is that you do that, you have a simpler life. It keeps life simple. There is peace in knowing what you can change and changing that which you can.
That reminds me of the Serenity Prayer. I can't remember the details of it, but it encapsulates that idea.
Yeah.
Finding solutions. How does that connect to your view of manhood?
I think because people always ask me, what is a manly man? I think a manly man is someone with discipline, someone with integrity, someone who continuously improves, someone who is confident, and someone who has emotional intelligence. And the whole idea is for a manly man to be an individual who continuously improves because nobody is perfect. So once it is that you are focused on becoming a better version of yourself, life is good. That is all that is required. You're not perfect, but you're getting better.
I like that. Not perfect, but getting better. Always that continuous improvement. There comes a time when every man gets tired. Tired of the weight that he's carrying alone. Tired of suffering in silence. Tired of pretending that he has it all together. And that is why I created Manhood Speaks Brotherhood. It is a private school community where regular men like you and I can connect, support each other, and build together. In this community, you're going to find real and raw conversations, but also other brothers who are willing to challenge and support your growth. For the first 7 days, you get in free. So click the link in the description and take your seat at the fire. And let's begin this process of transformation. Now, let's get you back to the interview. So I'm going to come back to this, but I want to just dive a bit deeper and just to go back a bit. Tell me a bit of your family background.
Last child, only son, um, which meant I had three sisters, so that means I had four mothers. Not necessarily the best feeling when you're trying to do something that you shouldn't be doing. But there are advantages. There are definite advantages. Growing up, I had the I was blessed enough to have a number of males around our family that I mirrored different parts of who they are. So I had uncles, biological and otherwise, who I grew up around, and that helped me form the identity of what I view a man should be, or what I seek to become. If you want me to explain that a little bit more, one of them, he was all about family and always laughing. There was another one who was also always laughing, always well dressed, praying all the time, quiet confidence. Another one, he was always telling the truth, not necessarily mixing it with love, but always telling the truth. So all of that was what definitely strongly influenced me as a, and of course my own father. So yeah.
Interesting background. So you had some strong male figures in your life, and they have impacted you and shaped your identity and your vision of manhood.
Yeah.
When you hear that term manhood, what comes up for you?
That's a good question. For me, the manhood has a few things when I think about it. It depends on who is saying it, because there is a view that manhood is evil, and men are evil, and all we do is do evil things, which is a bag of garbage. The issue we have in society is we have a lack of male influence, a lack of positive male influence. So for me, manhood is the pillars, the foundation on which a healthy society stands. You cannot have a society that protects, respects, and nurtures the vulnerable without healthy men.
Foundation of society. I'm hearing that, but I'm hearing also, and I'm not speaking from what you said here, a pushback where persons would say, just as you mentioned, that manhood is negative And there's this focus on toxic masculinity. But you're saying that manhood is the foundation of society. What are your thoughts when you hear persons mentioning that term, toxic masculinity, as compared to your perception of manhood being the foundation of society?
The only thing that is toxic about masculinity is when masculinity isn't present. 90% of gang members come from fatherless homes. 85% of youth in prison come from fatherless homes. 70% of teenage pregnancies come from fatherless homes. All of these things, which are negative, come from a lack of a positive male role model in their lives. Nothing is toxic about masculinity. Masculinity is only toxic when it is absent.
Masculinity is only toxic when it's absent. I've never heard that before. I think that is truly interesting. What about those persons who are in a home where the male figure is negative? And when I say negative, I'm talking about abusing his family.
Well, that is it right there. That's an absence of the true meaning of masculinity. A masculine man protects his woman, his children. My view of masculinity comes from the biblical view of masculinity. The Bible says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave his life for her." If it is that you have a man who is incapable of sacrificial love, where he's willing to die for his children, and it's not just taking a bullet, willing to die for his wife, it's not just taking a bullet, but it is nurturing and putting them before your wants, which is different from putting them before your needs. You can't put them before your needs because if you're dead, you can't help them. So it's for men to appreciate that their role includes being protectors in their homes. A protector is not supposed to be abusing the person that they're supposed to be protecting. So to answer your question, what are my views on a household where there is an abusive relationship and the father is the one that is abusive? Well, that is an example of a man who truly doesn't understand his work or his role.
I follow what you're saying and where you're going with this. And the idea is to move away from that term, toxic masculinity, and equating masculinity with toxicity in essence.
That is true because, I mean, does anyone ever say toxic femininity? Are we somehow implying that all women are perfect? Are we saying that you don't have abusive mothers? Are you saying that you don't have abusive mother in laws? Are you saying that there have never been a woman who has done something that was negative that led to the death or or injury of someone else? Are we implying that half of the population are angels from the Lord Himself? No, we are all human, and therefore, how we express a negative reaction might be different because what tends to happen with women is there's a lot of reputation destruction. So a woman might say, "Oh, he tried to rape me when he didn't." And that's what happened with Joseph, and he went to jail. Or what happened with Emmett Till? He was lynched because a woman in South of America said that he had called to her, and well, he was killed. And of course, she admitted afterwards that she had lied. What is that? Is if that is not the definition of toxic femininity, then there is no definition of toxic masculinity.
I follow where you're going. That is interesting. You mentioned earlier emotional intelligence.
Uh,
How do you see emotional intelligence when it comes to manhood?
it's a challenging one because whenever men hear about emotions, oftentimes you have a tendency to think, oh gosh, what kind of soft thing this now. For me, it's what I generally do is I tell persons it's about managing your responses, not changing necessarily how you feel, but managing your response to whatever makes you feel how you feel. It's important because we have a number of men who are unable to manage their emotions. They them get a horn. I'm not saying it's not painful and you're not going to be angry and you're not going to have a lot of thoughts. And those thoughts are not always pleasant. But having the thought and then taking the life of someone or taking your own life, there's a huge jump between that. Again, the whole idea of understanding what you can change and what you can't. You can't change a woman. If she wants to go and horn, she will horn from now until forever. The only thing you can change is you. So that may mean that you need to end the relationship. You may need to walk away from the relationship, but you cannot attempt to change someone else. So your beatings, your anger, your words, whatever you're trying will not work. And then what some men do is because they feel powerless, as someone once said, they try to use the ultimate power, which is taking the life of the person that they feel powerless in controlling. And
And
there we have, and there we then have a murder suicide.
mm, and I think we have been seeing quite of that in society of lately, where persons have been involved in some situation of cheating or infidelity, or as we say locally, porn. And as a result of that, it ends up in murder, suicide, or simply murder. So I can see the need for that emotional intelligence for men to work on developing their emotional intelligence.
Definitely.
What has been, you are working with young men. How has that work towards emotional intelligence? How has that been going?
They try me all the time.
Mm.
They make me exercise my emotional intelligence a lot. What's fun and games aside? They what it does is it allows me to reinforce what is needed. You know, the more you teach something, it's the more you remember it. And of course, what I try to do is also because I will one of the things I do is I have a boot camp where I expose young men to different skills. So I will teach them basic electrical wiring. They'll be exposed to mechanical, well, car repair, cooking, etc. And whenever I'm showing them something, if I'm the one showing, because we have a range of persons. Whenever I'm the one showing them something and they're getting frustrated, I remind them and the other instructors do this as well. I remind them that hey, this is frustrating. You're frustrated right now, but you're gonna have to overcome your feelings and work through it. And just as though you are frustrated right now, in life, there are times when you will feel frustrated about other things. But if you become flustered and if you don't focus, then you won't be able to you won't be able to get what you want to get done. So you give them you talk to them about managing or mastering their responses. And then when you put them in a real life situation, it's better for them to understand exactly what that looks like.
And have you been seeing significant progress where this is concerned?
I do. I often get feedback from the parents, and the feedback is consistently positive. And what is important as well is consistency. We give them skills. Well, when we give them these skills, what's important is that once the parents are aware of what these skills are, and we have a conversation as well with the parents, is we encourage the parents to be consistent in what you expect from them. that means there's a level of reinforcing which causes change to be constant. Change is constant. And once there is constant small changes or consistency in a change behavior, then character changes.
Consistent change to bring about character change. Like that. Let's dive in a bit into Alvin Brown. Tell me of a life changing transition that you have experienced in your life.
Um, what extent?
So, as far as you
Well, I
want
have
to
one.
go, or as deep as you want to go.
I have one. So I was starting a business, and when I was starting that business, I had to set up a website. And the website required me to set up animation, a small animated video. So someone said, why don't you try and do the animation yourself? I was like, do the animation myself. What madness is this? And they pointed me towards animation software. I think it was Go Animate at the time. And I played around with it, and I realized that it was good. And from there, I started doing more animations for different companies to the point where I was like, okay, I'm not going to do the business I was planning on doing. I'm going to start doing an animation business. And I've done a few animations for different companies that are still present. So there are a few works out there. However, when I started initially, at that time the oil prices went south. And when I say south, I don't mean San Fernando. So two of the large companies that had agreed for me to come on and do some animations for them froze their spending. And because of that, I said, okay, well, I need to have some type of income to hold me while things get better. So I'd start teaching in high school for a year because I've been an instructor at tertiary level before. So I'm gonna teach as a high school for a year. 9 years later, I'm still there. But what I love about that transition is I started realizing that there were a lot of young men who didn't have father figures, who didn't have positive role models. And that is how I started the Manly Man series. So for me, that in and of itself is an example of how I adjust according to what is required. I will get into a new situation. I'll find a solution. So I found a solution for the animation. I realized that this was something that other businesses needed. And then when the major businesses who had to freeze spending, I adjusted accordingly, started working at a high school. And when I realized that the young men there had an issue, I again solved the problem. So that is who Alvin is in a nutshell. If I see an issue, I'll fix it. Or at least that's the plan.
Alvin, the problem solver. That is interesting in that you were going in one particular direction, and because things change, the environment change, you had to pivot, and by pivoting, you were placed in another direction, and as a result of that, you are here today with the Manly Man series, helping guiding young men. So I think that's rather interesting. Along that way, where you were transitioning or any other part in your life, were there any moments that you experience hardships?
Um, yeah, yeah. There have been moments where I experienced hardships. There are times when you you're working with a young man and what happens is unfortunately, sometimes when you're teaching, there are times when, as a teacher, you seem to have more interest in the son than the parents or the son does. So you're more interested in him doing his schoolwork. You're more interested in him coming to school. You're more interested in him managing his emotions. And what happens then is when you're no longer his teacher, things fall by the wayside. And you're like, all that work and all that ability that he has, but there's no one there to continue to push him. So that to me is one of the most annoying occurrences when you have a young man with ability, which all of them tend to have, and the parents are not interested because they have their own problems and their problems in their world are more important than their child's problem. And they don't realize that all they need sometimes is some encouragement. Like, you will be surprised how well a young man can do if you simply encourage him. It is amazing.
Encouragement can go a very long way.
Yeah. Even for adult males.
Most certainly. Emotional intelligence. Young men. Have you ever had an instance where a young man cried in your presence?
Yeah, I have. I've seen that. The most recent one, he had lost a friend. A friend was murdered. So, it was more forgivable in society if you are crying if someone who you love has died. Um, because I teach at an all boys school, so they can be unforgiving at times, but no one had an issue with that. Have I seen other instances? I have seen other instances, but it's usually not in the presence of other young men. So sometimes they do something that they shouldn't, and you have a conversation with them and they get emotional about it. They start to shed tears. But I've heard of instances where young men have cried for things are not, which do not involve the loss of someone, which we could argue is a lot less on the scale of importance, and the young men tore him apart. And I've seen that as well when I was in high school. So, one has to be, I keep telling the young man, there's nothing wrong with crying, but you need to find a safe place to do it. And that place is not in the classroom. Unfortunate as it is, we can argue that we need to change that. But for now, at this point in time, at present, we need to recognize that's not the case. That's like saying, okay, I need to be able to walk with 20,000 US dollars worth of jewelry in the middle of Port of Spain, in the middle of the capital, in the middle of the night. Yes, you should be able to do so, but can you? You cannot. So while we change it or we put things in place to change it, we must recognize how it is at this time. And at this time, you do not take God out of your thoughts with $20,000 worth of jewelry downtown Port of Spain in the middle of the night. One must be pragmatic.
Pragmatic. I think this is an interesting point that you made here, where you spoke about him crying because a friend was killed and it was forgivable. And within the school environment and within the wider society, there's a bit of an aversion to crying. And as you said, you should be able to walk with your jewels. However, is it the right decision? So now we are having this situation here where it isn't comfortable for a man to cry or a young man to cry, even though we recognize its importance. From your perception, what is that doing to young men or to men? How is that affecting them?
It it means that they can't be vulnerable. It means that they are viewed oftentimes simply as persons who provide. I'm interested in you as if where you can provide, but don't come and tell me in the process of you providing that you're having a hard time providing. No one cares, honey. A man fears that's the response he's going to hear. Honey, we don't care. Where is the lunch money? You understand? So if a man is unable to express a level of vulnerability with those he loves, then he's going to take it elsewhere, or he's going to stuff it in. And if he stuffs it in, it might explode at some point in time, which is what we don't want. Now, we could argue again that that is because of, you know, I will retract. I was about to say something and I'll hold that one for now. But yeah, the challenge that we have as a society is men are concerned about being vulnerable because no one wants a man that is vulnerable. And that's a generalized statement because I do know women who are supportive.
Yeah.
I am blessed to know a number of women that are supportive. However, I've come to realize that my world and the world of others is not always the same. And I do know, and I've also experienced at least once in my life, one individual who, when you said, hey, these are my challenges, and it wasn't a case of these are my challenges, please help me. They shared, and because they shared, I was like, okay, so we're being vulnerable. These are some of my challenges. And the response was not pleasant. And I was like, it's not that serious though. Then I realized it happened again. And I started to realize it was a trend. So because of that, I no longer shared, even when they shared a lot, because I came to realize I was like, no, 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 you're not tricking me with that again. And I told them afterwards, I was like, listen, our interactions are totally different now. Because when you shared, I was supportive. I listened. When I shared, you basically took it as I don't know what description I could use, but I mean, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, At some point in time, you're gonna realize there's a trend. So you put space between yourself and that person because they are they're not good for you. They're not good for you. If you can't be vulnerable with them, then they're not good for you. And like I said before, I personally know a number of young women who are supportive, but I've come to realize that in many instances, there are men who don't have any, which is most unfortunate. And I've experienced what one is like, and it's a good thing at that point. It wasn't an intimate relationship because then that would have been more challenging.
At that moment when you experienced that, take me back to that moment. How did you feel in that moment?
Honestly, I found it comical and I was like, what madness is this? Like, well, I mean, I tend to have because I grew up around a lot of young because I grew up I had three sisters. I was always comfortable around women. I had a lot of good friends that were female. So I've always had a healthy view of myself and I always had a lot of confidence. So I found it amusing the first time it happened. And again, because we weren't in our intimate relationship, I just found it amusing. The next time it happened, I found it annoying. And then the third time it happened, I was like, but this is ridiculous. So I changed it completely. This is someone who was literally opening up. So if it is that you're opening up at some point in time, you're gonna be like, all right, well, if it is that we're sharing X, Y, Z. And it wasn't any, thankfully, it wasn't anything serious. Literally wasn't. It's just that they thought, I don't know what they were thinking. I guess they weren't used to a man being vulnerable, but it wasn't anything serious. But for them, any hint of vulnerability was to be avoided, I guess, with great energy.
I guess it boils back to that sometimes perception that vulnerability in a man equals to weakness.
And to be honest, I think maybe that was a desire to use someone as well. I mean, if it is that you're talking and you're offloading, and somebody just cracks and says, "These are my challenges." The mere fact that you would want to put distance between yourself and that person and state certain things to put distance between yourself and that person implies that the conversation or the relationship was one-sided. If the relationship is one-sided, then balance it by removing yourself from the equation.
I like that. I guess that's something that we all have to work on, because sometimes this person who may not be the best for us, and the relationship may be imbalanced. This individual could be a close family member. How do we then balance this relationship or remove ourselves, especially if this is someone that is very close to us?
That's an excellent question. What I would say is just don't dive into whatever it is you're going through. Because if it is that you are being vulnerable, and in being vulnerable, they are pushing you away or using it against you, then you're hurting yourself. At some point, it's not them hurting you. At some point, it's you hurting yourself. Therefore, I would suggest you avoid being vulnerable. So whatever it is that's bothering you, find someone else who you can trust, but don't use them because it doesn't end well.
I agree.
I mean, this is also having tried to explain the reason why. If it's a family member, you want to at least give them the benefit of, hey, I didn't appreciate when you did X, Y, Z. If it's a family member, yeah, I'll at least give them that.
I agree. Have you ever struggled with an emotion?
Yeah, all the time. All the time. I think the issue isn't struggling with the emotion. I think the issue is struggling with what to do with the emotion. Not everything is legal. uh, not everything is legal. So the question, it's not the emotion that's the problem. It's what you want to do with the emotion. When I
So
was in when I was in high school, I went to all boys school in Jamaica, and you had to stand up for yourself. And at that time, unfortunately, unfortunately, I had an anger problem up until third form. So I had to get to the point where I would be able to manage that emotion, or what I wanted to do with that emotion. So when someone was playing around and accidentally boxed my food out of or hit my food out of my hand because they were playing during lunchtime, my response was not pleasant. Or they stepped on my shoes because, oh, your shoes look clean, he's new. My response would probably involve him being projected a few feet away from myself.
simply projected.
Yeah, miraculously, a magic trick. So, I remember one day someone had said to me, "You're a Christian?" And they looked shocked. And I was like, "Yes, what's so shocking about that?" So I said to myself, what am I doing differently or similarly to others why they don't, why they almost said, why they couldn't believe that statement? And I came to the point where my responses when I was angry was probably the reason for that. So what I started doing is be talking to God. I'd be like, God, right now I want to project this individual a few feet away from me. Or I'd say, right now I would like to punch him in his face and I'll enjoy it. I probably shouldn't, but I really want to. So please help me not to. And being emotionally honest with God allowed me to manage my emotions. I think oftentimes as men, we're not emotionally honest. We lie to ourselves about what we want to do. We lie to others about what we want to do. And in lying about what we want to do, then we're unable to not do it. Because we act like we want to smile and put our hands together when we want to do something else. And in not being emotionally honest, then we can't about what actions we want to do, that we can't control those actions. So I think the most important thing is to be emotionally honest. Does it upset you? Yes. Do you want to do ABC? Yes. Will you enjoy doing ABC? Of course, you will be delighted in doing it. But what is the repercussion? Will you enjoy the repercussion? Probably not. So, we have to start with honesty. I don't like this guy. I would like to bounce his vehicle. Will that get me in trouble? Yeah, most likely. So, we have to start there. We have to be emotionally honest.
Emotionally honest. That's a interesting topic. How does one become emotionally honest in the midst of a situation where the emotions are riled up?
Focus on at that time, you just want to do what you want to do, most likely. So when you're riled up, it's different from when somebody starting to upset you and you're like, say, I am going to do X, Y, Z. But when you've reached that point of action, you need to jump beyond the action to the consequence. Because you're right there now, you're about to do the action. But the thing is, okay, what's the consequence? This man, by driving, staring in my face, I want to step out of my vehicle and bring him out of his vehicle by his collar. But what is the response to that? Maybe he has something in there that might respond to me in a way that is my body might be allergic to.
Quite detrimental.
You understand?
to your health.
Will I be on the newspapers gone too soon? Or will I be embarrassed because he might beat the snot out of me and I'll be viral on social media for the next 6 months? There are a number of possibilities. Do I want to find out which one of those will happen? Or I might be sitting down in a prison cell, wishing I had walked away. I keep telling the young men this. I say, all it takes is one punch, one properly timed punch and one properly timed fall is the difference between you and a young man that is sitting at YTC. He doesn't even have to get the hit properly. He just has to fall wrong. And that's it. So I think when we're riled up, what's most important is the consequence. Okay, I'm really upset right now, but is it worth it? Is it worth sitting down in a jail cell for the next 15 to 25 years? Is it worth it? Is it worth getting killed over a parking space? Is it worth it? Is it worth losing my job because, I have been seeing beating the snot out of this individual online?
Tell me of a current challenge that you have now in your life.
I think one of my biggest challenges right now is connecting with parents because they're always the 98 who will be like, hey, you know, this is great. I like, I like, I like what's happening. I like what is being done. And they're always the two who they are, it's like children raising children, or it might be a case where they have their own trauma that they're struggling to handle. It's not even like they intentionally not providing what is needed for that son to mature or become a best version of himself, but it's just that they themselves are hanging on. I've come to realize that there are a lot of young men who have some serious challenges. And there are times when that's one challenge. The next challenge is when they have a situation at home that is totally, sometimes we look and we say, you're 15, you're 14. What kind of problems you have? I remember once there's this young man who he was always there are reasons for me to be concerned. So I pulled him aside one day and I was like, "What's going on with you?" And he told me that, "Sir, my mother, she has a boyfriend and he doesn't work, stays at home all day. And when I leave here, I have to go to the supermarket to work to buy food for myself because she doesn't provide anything for me." So he goes to work when he's in second form. So that would be eighth grade for those in the States. He goes to work and supports himself because her money is for her man. So he has to do everything for himself. And I would see that young man and see him being distracted and see him being immature and not realizing that this is the only safe space that he has. When he leaves here, he gets to become an adult and goes to work to support himself. This is the only place where he can be happy because when he leaves here, he has to go to work, support himself, and then from there, he goes to a home where he is not cared for. I think those to me are my biggest challenges because it upsets me beyond measure. And there are times when what I'd like to say, I have to employ emotional intelligence because, yeah.
Um, I think that's a real difficult situation to be in as a young man having to fend for yourself at such a young age. But I guess there would be benefits to it in terms of his growth and his maturity, hopefully. But that isn't a situation that any young man should be in at this point in time at such a young age.
Because then the question is how would he view even his relationships if those who is closest to him, so it's I hope I've long since wondered where he is, and I'd love to find out where he is. And I hope that the end is 100,000 times better than the beginning.
I do hope so too, as well. So as we begin to wrap up, tell me, Alvin, what does legacy mean to you as a man?
You know, when you die, what is said about you is the truth. And I don't mean just on your at your funeral, because sometimes we like to embellish the truth.
Yeah,
But when you
we
can
color it.
do, yeah, with a big fat box of crayons, and not just crayons, a whole paint, a tin of paint, a gallon of paint. What I want is for my children to hear, because I heard this recently. When when somebody can look at your child and say, I knew your father, he was a good man. He said that's what I want. I want my name to open doors for my children and those who I love. If I can get that done, then I would have given them a legacy. Yeah. My name needs to open doors for them. That would be my legacy.
I think that's a powerful legacy to want to live up to, where long after you are gone, you continue to serve those who you love, your loved ones. And I think that if men actually think about their legacy and what they want their legacy to be, I guess it should and would have a tremendous impact on society. Alvin, this has been a very informative conversation. Where can people connect with you and this Manly Man series? How can persons, young men, be a part of this series?
Well, the Manly Man series, if they type that in Instagram, on YouTube, and Facebook, they'll see us. We have boot camps where we expose young men to different skills. We do parenting seminars as well. And we're currently based in Trinidad and Tobago, but we're going to be going all over the Caribbean at the very minimum to have these boot camps, because we come to realize that a lot of individuals, a lot of parents want their children to be exposed to different skills. And one of the things we do, one of the advantages of this is when they're exposed to different skills, then they have an idea of, hey, maybe this is a career that I want to get into. And in so doing, we allow for them to get knowledge, because knowledge is required. And there are times when, unfortunately, the school system doesn't allow for certain skills to be given in that environment as much as we would like.
Right? Alvin Brown, it was a pleasure having you on Manhood Speak. I just want to say thank you for checking out the entire episode. Manhood Speaks is a space where regular men like you get to share their experiences so that they can inspire other men. If you wish to be a guest on this show, just send me an email at manhoodspeakspodcast@gmail.com. And I want to ask you to consider subscribing. When you subscribe, you are not just simply subscribing to another YouTube channel. You are becoming a part of a revolution. You are joining a community of brothers, men who are redefining what it means to be a man in modern society today. So subscribe, and I will see you in the next interview.